It's my vocal warm-up. I'm not messing around today, Walker. I got the bees machine ready to roll.
You are ready to go today. You can tell when Doug Branson's ready to roll. How many beep bops do you get before you hop on? If there's 0, he's not feeling it. If you get a lot, boy's feeling it. The Branson beep bop.
Yep, it's the bebop meter, and it's high because we are going back to one of, I think it's not just one of my favorite. I mean, I think it's a lot of people's favorite era of Hornets basketball. The Orig Hornets. We're going back into that era. Now, the Bees machine will figure out where exactly we're going, but we know we're going back to the original era because, Walker, this is Every Hornets Boxscore, the only podcast that dares to look at every single box score in Charlotte Hornets and Bobcats history. And the way we do that is we randomly select a box score from 5 different eras of the franchise's history. And now we're going back to the future, back to the original Hornets. What do you think about that?
Here's what I think about it real quickly before we move into the game.
Yeah.
The way that you intro this show is such that I have no clue when it's coming. And I don't know if this is calculated. I don't know. Usually a lot of the times we're just kind of going back and forth and then you say, all right, here we go, or we'll count down or whatever. But now you just kind of start. I don't even know when you started this show, like during the conversation at some point. I don't even know. I have no clue.
Half an hour ago.
Did I log on and immediately, and I was immediately recording? Okay.
Well, I'm pretty gassed up, man. I went to the dentist this morning. My teeth are as clean as you'll find them. So, got in and out really quickly. The key to the dentist, it's the key to really anything if you want to get out of somewhere quickly, is to get the first appointment. I try my best with any kind of doctor, whatever, dentist, early appointment, because everything gets backed up from there. It's just like flights. Like I always get on the 6:30 a.m. flight. Yes, it's tough to get up in the morning. I get it. 4:30, it's painful. Yeah. But your flight's never delayed because it's the first flight.
Yeah, I mean that's a beautiful thing. I just can't get up that early, so I'm just gonna take the chance that it might get delayed and get that extra couple of hours of sleep if I can. That's the way I roll.
Well, I'm older, I'm wiser, and you'll get here at some point.
You're older. You're definitely older. I can't argue that.
All right, let's do it. Let's go to the Bees machine and find out where we are headed on this adventure. Let's.
Bees! Bees everywhere!
My camera shot for some reason. There we go.
Wait, is it a Pacers explosion? Is that what's taking place? It's the
Pacers at the Hornets, February 2nd, 1994. Woo! Walker is holding a Rick Smits number 45 Indiana Pacers jersey.
Yes, and it is fit for a 5-year-old. That's right. For this episode, the Bees machine gave me a Rick Smits 5-year-old jersey that I had back in like 1997, and I thought I would bring that out to show you. Yes, watching. I might have been in diapers watching this game, but there's a very good possibility that I was watching this game. Shout out to Rick Smits. We'll talk about him. I'm excited, bringing back both of the teams that I am a fan of, and we're going to talk about a Hornets loss here, 124-112.
124-112, and both of these teams, both of these teams around the same record. The Pacers at 19-23, the Charlotte Hornets at 22-21. So they still had a winning record to this point. But before we dive into the box score, would you like, Walker, a little context around the 1993-1994 campaign for the Charlotte Hornets?
Yeah, let's hear the campaign.
So this was the season after they won their first playoff series against Boston. So you've got Alonzo, you've got Larry Johnson. They're both rolling along. You add Muggsy, you add Dell, and they've got a really solid core that won a playoff series and then played their next opponent pretty tough. And sky's the limit for this team, right? and you would think, all right, automatic, they're going back to the playoffs, everything is gravy. Unfortunately for the Hornets, they suffered a ton of injuries. This team was decimated by injuries. We'll get to the box score here in just a second, but you're not going to see Larry Johnson's name. You're not going to see Alonzo Mourning's name. Both of them injured for extended periods of time, and so they had to call on some help, and they were not doing well. And in fact, they finished this season right at the line, 41-41, did not make the playoffs.
Yeah, this was a year where you thought maybe, just maybe, the Charlotte Hornets could get past after, get even further than their win against the Boston Celtics. That was the famous Alonzo Mourning shot. That's the most important moment in Charlotte Hornets history, and it came very early on after they were in existence from 88 and 89. Yeah, I'm trying to look at some of the standings here too. You mentioned the Charlotte Hornets, they finished dead even at 500. And Seattle that year finished 63-19. Houston was 58-24. Atlanta had 57 wins. If you look at some of the Eastern Conference teams, though, the Hornets, you felt like they could have gotten to a 50-win ball club there, and yet the injuries just piled up too much, and eventually they wouldn't be able to get past some of these injuries. Yeah, it's unfortunate because this was pretty much, it's this best core, and then you can go back to the early 2000s where they had a chance to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they weren't able to capitalize on it.
They missed it by a game to the Miami Heat, and this was particularly a year where I think, obviously, it would be a few more years before my Hornets fandom really kicked into high gear, but I can imagine being a Hornets fan at this time and going, wait a minute, we got Alonzo, we got Larry Johnson, they're a year more seasoned, playing better together, Muggsy, Bogues, Dell Curry's great, everybody's healthy, we're good to go, we just won a playoff series, and Michael Jordan retired. The East is wide open. This is incredible. This is an opportunity. And but unfortunately, the injuries pile up. They missed it by a game, by the way, to the Miami Heat, powered by Glenn Rice, a future Hornet, Steve Smith, Ronnie Cycli, who famously told Charlotte, "Don't draft me. I'm not going there." And so then Charlotte fans booed him mercilessly. I believe that was I think that was the first year, and so they ended up going with Chapman instead. Or maybe that was the J.R. Smith year. I'd have to double check that.
J.R. Reed, yeah.
J.R. Reed, yeah. J.R. Smith, that'd have been fun. Also, Bimbo Cole's great name for the Miami Heat during that time. Don't know anything about him, just great name. So there you go. That's the context around this particular season of Hornets basketball. Let's get to the box score. I'm going to scroll down here to the Hornets side. Starting for your Charlotte Hornets, Hersey Hawkins, Eddie Johnson, Muggsy Bogues, Mike Jaminski, and the Gap Man, Kenny Gaddison. Your reserves, Dell Curry, who was 11 of 20 from the field for 27 points. Wowza. Big game for Curry. And 4 3-pointers. Eddie Johnson had 5 3-pointers.
Yeah,
12 of 23 from the field.
They both attempted 8. So 16 from 2 guys on your team. And then you only had 19 total. So, yeah, Tony Bennett took a 3-pointer. David Wingate took a 3-pointer. Hersey Hawkins took the other one. A lot of good 3-point shooters, or at least guys that were going to chuck it. But Dell Curry, Hersey Hawkins, also a good shooter there. And I'm not going to say ahead of their time, but had that kind of identity. 19 3-point attempts, that's a lot in that age, in the early 1990s.
11 of 19 is and it's great. It's 58% from 3, and you managed to lose this game somehow. Let's see. So Indiana opens up the first quarter, big lead, 33-19. Second quarter, they allowed 47 points. Holy free holies. Third quarter,
80
Charlotte
points
did
in
win.
That half. Right, 80
Yikes.
In the first half, which is as many. You don't really see that a ton now, despite a ton of emphasis on the offensive end.
No, I'm looking at these field goal percentages for Indiana. Derek McKee, 6 of 11. Reggie Miller, 9 of 3. He was 4 of 5 from 3. Rick Smits was 10 of 11. Just absolutely unstoppable.
No zone in this game. So, yeah, Rick Smits dominated.
Yeah, there you go. Haywood Workman, 1 of 5. Didn't have a great game. Sam Mitchell, future coach, 2 of 6, 7 points. On the bench, Vern Fleming. Another great. I love these old NBA names. Vern
That's a
Fleming.
great one.
Vern Fleming, I do know, it was one of the early players to put a triple double on the Hornets. I caught that in perusing my the media guides that I bought. So Vern Fleming has a triple double on the Hornets. Byron Scott, 8 of 9. Antonio Davis, 3 of 3. Antonio, we've had him on Locked On Hornets before. Malik Sealy, 2 of 8, and then Kenny Williams, 0 of 2 from the field. But I want to go back to the Hornets here. 32 points for Eddie Johnson, 27 points for Dell Curry. We mentioned Tony Bennett and David Wingate. And then there's a name here that I didn't initially recognize, Marty Conlon. Do you know anything about Marty Conlon?
It is the one player that is listed that I have zero clue existed. I did not know at all who Marty Conlon was.
Yeah, so apparently he signed a 10-day contract with the Charlotte Hornets because of all of these injuries that they had. They plucked him from the Rockford, Illinois CBA team. He was playing for the CBA at the time, I believe it's Continental Basketball Association. So Conlon, I'm going to click on his name and look through his stats real quick. So he was part of the Providence Final Four team and spent a year in Seattle, spent a year in Sacramento, comes over to Charlotte, plays.
Oh, long career. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Played for the Bullets after that. Then 2 years in Milwaukee, a year in Boston, 2 in Miami, and then played overseas for a time. But played 16 games for the Hornets during this period where both Zoe and LJ were missing in action. And look at that, double-digit scoring, 10 points per game, 5.6 rebounds, 1.8 assists. Wore the number 7, by the way, if you've been following along with who wore it best. It'll be a while before we get to Marty Conlon on that list. But he donned the number 7. But yeah, so if only, Walker, if only we had a chance to talk to Marty Conlon about joining the Hornets. If only. Marty, thanks so much for joining Every Hornets Box Score. Today's box score is the first game you played for the Charlotte Hornets. And to get some context, I thought I'd start with a write-up in the Charlotte Observer the day after the game. This was written by Tom Sorensen. He writes, in real life, Marty Conlon was a center for the Rockford, Illinois Lightning of the Continental Basketball Association. He was sleeping in Rockford Tuesday when the telephone rang. It was his agent, and the news was good. The Charlotte Hornets wanted to sign Conlon to a 10-day contract. Conlon flew to Charlotte late Tuesday afternoon, and on Wednesday morning was given a physical and signed a contract. At noon, he joined the team for a light practice, and at night, he played 29 minutes in a real game. Marty, that sounds like a pretty whirlwind experience for your return back to the NBA. Yes. Is that how you remember it?
Exactly. I remember waking up because I was in the Midwest, and my agent, who did a wonderful job getting me back into the NBA, called me, and he said, I got good news. I have a call up. But a little more texture to this was, I was playing well in Rockford, and I was, a 4 or 5, power forward center. And there had been a couple of call-ups prior to that for that position, other players. And they got called up. And, obviously, you wonder why I didn't get called up. Those other guys, good for them, obviously, they got called up. But, I really had some good fortune because, like you said, I played 29 minutes. Usually when you get a call up, you're sitting on the bench, kind of what we're doing right now, sitting, because they just need that slot to fill in a player for league rules. But when I got to Charlotte, the team was decimated with injuries. So, it was really good fortune that I was able to, get out there 29 minutes and play. So when I think of Charlotte and when I think of the Hornets, I only think of good things, and especially that first day.
Yeah, you mentioned the injuries. No Larry Johnson for this game. No Alonzo Mourning. They were both out for extended periods during this season. A season after they had made and won their first playoff series. There was a lot of buzz around the team, and then injuries seemed to set a lot of that back in that next season. Do you remember anything about the mood of the team around the time you joined? I mean, were people, all right, we got to get this thing back together, or what was the mood around the team? Do you recall?
I think the mood was maybe a bit of shock. Again, I was obviously just trying to to make it and, get some playing time and do my thing. But, I remember I didn't see Larry Johnson. Apparently his injury was so serious, that he was doing rehab kind of separate from the team. So, I had been with the team for weeks prior to even, really seeing Larry, and then, obviously him trying to get back in practice. I remember Alonzo being on the bench, and I knew Alonzo prior because we were Big East rivals in college.
Right.
Him being obviously Georgetown, me being Providence. But I remember him being out for at least 2-3 weeks. So it was like almost like a new territory for the Hornets because, obviously those are the two young stars. But we had to find a way to kind of compete and perform. Now, for me personally, playing with Muggsy Bogues and playing that style of play, that offensive style, was really, very, very good for me in my game.
Yeah. Talk about that, because I heard you mention that in another interview. Obviously, this wasn't your first rodeo in the NBA. You were in Sacramento, and then you were in Seattle for a year apiece. Right. But you got more minutes, more opportunity, and you mentioned that the offense was more wide open.
Right.
Talk to me about that for people that weren't aware of like how offenses ran generally in that like mid 90s era. How were the Hornets different, and how did that open up your game?
Yeah, I mean, the Hornets were almost, they're almost ahead of their time. With the influx of international players and spreading the floor, that's the way that Alan Bristow had his offense, which was perfect for me. But for younger people, they obviously don't remember. They can go on YouTube, but a lot of offense in the NBA was really ugly. It was a lot of isolation offense. So. For example, let's say, you had a great 3-man, or a 4-man. Let's say, for example, Karl Malone. I remember after Charlotte, I was with the Washington Bullets. That's how old I am. I played for the Bulls, not the Wizards. And Tom Gugliotta was, the main offensive threat. So a lot of times the whole offense was predicated getting in their hands, which is understandable. But if you were not one of those players, let's say you were the 5-man, you were isolated at the top corner. And then a lot of times you were telling the ref, like, okay, the player's guarded me. Either he's got to stay at the foul line or double team the ball. And, understandably, you want the ball in the best player's hands, offensive players, to score. But for a role player, it's difficult because it's difficult to move. It's difficult to get offensive rebounds because you're isolated high up on offense.
Right.
And really, most importantly, for a fan, it just wasn't I didn't enjoy watching it, and I just didn't think it was an effective offense. And, in the 20, 30 years, since, we've obviously, we being the NBA, have really opened the floor up. Obviously, great players like Nowinski and like that, the stretch four, which you kind of take it in, really opened up the court. But Charlotte was playing that style of play in the mid-90s. And then on top of that, a player with me with a decent outside shot playing with Muggsy Bogues, who could really just obviously get anywhere on the court he wanted, and then draw defense to him. He'd throw it off to me. I was moving around. I could hit that shot. Plus, like I said, you weren't isolated up high. So even if there's a shot up, your offense was fluid. So you had a much, much better chance to get an offensive rebound. It was just, like I said, it was really good fortune that I was able to get that call up. I remember exactly, February 1st, Rockford, Illinois. You could Google it. It was the Alpine Inn. A motor inn, it's still there in Rockford, Illinois. Got the call in, motor inn, you just park your car, walk right to your room. Got the call up. And, obviously, when I think of Charlotte Hornets, Alan Bristow. Now, I had played for the Hornets the summer of 1991 in Summer League.
Okay.
So Alan Bristow knew who I was. I played for them for like a week and a half in Summer League. So, we did have a relationship. They did understand my game a little bit. And, it was obviously good that I put my time in there because, they picked me when I was in the Continental Basketball Association.
Give us a window into Alan Bristow. Was really the first coach to come in for the Charlotte Hornets and give them the sort of success and organization that that the franchise desperately needed. Give us a little bit of a window into what kind of coach and person he was.
Well, he was a straight shooter, a good guy. he was very young. So, most of the coaches, you'd play for were a little bit older, but, he was still like, I think in his early 40s. What I was impressed with him is before every game, he'd come in and bring a lot of energy. A lot of times, in the NBA, it's a cerebral league. You're obviously dealing with men, adults, but he would come in, and I think it was really good for a young team. And he'd come in, I remember exactly. He'd be waiting for him, and then he'd come right out of the coach's office and just have energy and say, "Come on, we have to come get it. Let's get after it. Let's get excited." And so he brought a lot of energy, almost like best aspects of a college coach, bringing that kind of energy. And I thought that was good for a young team. And he really gave a lot of autonomy to the guards, to Muggsy, Bogues. Obviously, Dell Curry was a great shooter. Hershey Hawkins, but they had a lot of autonomy to create offense and do things. But for somebody like Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, I mean, it must have been a dream come true to play in that kind of offense. Where they could come up to the foul line, turn, face, they could post up, and then obviously you got like a point guard like Muggsy Bogues just creating offense for you. That's a lot of easy baskets. And then, like I said, for a role player like me, when I mentioned this before, but when you're in isolation offense, even if you're not touching the ball in isolation offense, you're stuck way up, think at the top of the key, and then over by the marker there.
You go get a hot dog, a soda. You could just
yeah, exactly, yeah. But I mean, but then you're like, okay, then you got to sprint and try to get that offensive rebound. So, you're right. Even if you're, getting a lot of minutes, your stats are pretty, flatliners, because you're so isolated up there. Again, in Charlotte's offense, there was so much moving, that kind of stuff. Obviously, you don't want Dell Curry shooting, Hershey Hawkins. Right. But a 4 or 5 like me, power forward, center, to get in there, get those offensive rebounds, just be a part of it was fantastic. And like I said, for the Charlotte fans, it must have been great to watch that kind of basketball,
Did this opportunity essentially kind of vault you into the next period of your career? I mean, was this where you were like, "Hey, Alonzo, take your time, buddy. I got this."
Yeah. I was like, Alonzo, I think that knee needs a little more ice. Take it easy. Yeah. What happened is then, so things were going well. I was playing well. Obviously, we were winning, losing. A little more losing. And then they traded for a guy that turned out to be a good friend of mine, Frank Brakowski. Mm. So I remember the Charlotte newspapers headline was like, "Hornets repair wall with brick." Obviously it play on his name, Frank Brakowski. Sure. So obviously they brought him in, but I just want to mention that I became very good friends with Brakowski after that, and then I had played with Eddie Johnson.
Yeah. He had a big game. He had a big one. I think he had 30 plus points in this game that we're looking at today.
Yeah. Yes. And, he was a veteran. And a few years prior, when I was trying to make the Seattle Sonics, I wasn't drafted. He was an excellent guy to me. He really encouraged me. He gave me confidence. I always remember what a great guy he was to me a few years prior when I was trying to make the Seattle Sonics. Because, I wasn't drafted. So, I had to play, I was in the CBA prior. And then, I made the Sonics in 1991.
I'm sure you played against Muggsy prior to joining the Hornets, but did his just being in the locker room with it, did his height shock you? Did his like, oh my gosh, this guy is, they said he was small, but this guy is small.
Yeah, no, well, I knew him prior because, boy, what a beautiful campus. I was recruited in the mid 80s to Wake Forest.
Right.
So, on the recruiting vision, I met him. Okay. And, I was like, I remember then I was like, wow, this guy's tiny, and then he became this, very, very good NBA player. And you're like, this is incredible. Yeah. So, I was kind of familiar with him. So I knew, how, small he was, but I knew how powerful he was. He's obviously height-wise, but, he's a very powerful legs, arms, and that kind of thing. And I knew he was probably the quickest guy, strongest, fastest guy in the NBA. So, we were playing off of him is a dream come true.
And he really powered. Yeah, he really powered that style of play. I mean, you probably couldn't have done it without Muggsy at the point.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I mean, like that kind of offense. obviously the league has changed now, with the amount of shooters and stuff like that. But that offense, then you needed a point guard like Muggsy. But again, for a Charlotte fan back in the mid '90s, I mean, that was a great style play to watch because, again, I don't know if people really, everybody's much, worse, I'm older. They don't remember how isolated offense was back in the '90s. And, I didn't like it. So, I think it was ahead of its time, and the style of play that they're playing now in the NBA is much, much better offensively.
You mentioned Larry Johnson wasn't around the team because of his injury, but Alonzo was. I don't know if you remember this, but in this game, in the reporting for this game, I found out that Alonzo actually got a technical on the bench. They teed him up on the bench, which I think is still kind of rare for somebody in the suit and tie.
No, they kicked him out of the game.
They said ejection. Yeah. So what do you remember about that moment?
Well, I remember that, playing against him, I remember he was a very, very intense, guy, and I remember, you know what I do remember? I remember playing against him in college. Yeah. And, the college, the talent level was so much higher than it is now. So you just imagine this Big East with Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning, Jason Williams St. John's. Yeah. Derek Coleman, Syracuse, Billy Owens, Syracuse. So, I'd play against these guys, and, each of those teams, when I played for Providence, we beat them. Obviously they would beat us, but we played 2-3 times a year. Yeah. And they were all lottery picks. So, when I wasn't drafted, I said, well, if those guys are lottery picks, they're probably the understanding that they'll probably become all-star players, which obviously Alonzo Mourning did, Mutombo did, Derek Coleman did. So if I can play okay against them in college, there might be an opportunity for me in the NBA. So that's a long way to get around to. I remember him being a very, very intense guy. And then obviously he showed it there on the bench, he obviously wanted to win so bad that, he got ejected from the game, a game that he didn't even play in. So it was pretty wild.
Fantastic. This has been amazing. I've got one final question for you. Sure. Basketball Reference lists your nickname as Celtic Killer. Do you recognize that nickname? Are you aware of this nickname that Basketball Reference says you have, Celtic Killer?
Yeah, it was really when I was with the Milwaukee Bucks, 2 years with the Milwaukee Bucks in the mid '90s. So after Charlotte, I was really given an opportunity to play a lot. And, I think up in New England, they remember me from Providence. So,
Did you have any other nicknames? Did you have any other nicknames? In any level, did you have any other great nicknames?
I remember in Seattle, and then it was at the very end, you see it on cable, they call me Marty McFly.
All right,
Back to the movies, Marty McFly. So I remember Eddie Johnson, those guys used to tease me with that, because I remember at that time the Back to the Future. So, any nickname that they would give me, I'd take. But again, just going back to the Hornets, it was really good fortune that, I was called up by them because, like we said, the injuries were wide open. I could have been chosen by another team prior to that in January. And, I would probably just sat the bench and then been back in the CBA. So, really, when I think of Charlotte, when I think of the Hornets, I only think of good things. It was 7 great weeks of basketball for me.
Awesome. Well, before we get you out of here, Marty, tell us about MartyProHoops.com. This is your basketball clinic.
So, I'm just, I live in Connecticut, the tri-state area outside New York. And I train players. So I'm coaching high school up here in Connecticut, and I'm training, players up here. I coach I coach at a high school near where Scotty Burrell coaches here in Connecticut.
Oh, another former
Charlotte. Yeah. So, so, anybody got young people here in suburban Connecticut, let me know. I'll train you.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, I'm interested in this. What's the one piece of advice that if you want them to take away, if you learn nothing else, what do you want people to take away?
That during the off season is a time to collect offensive skills. So, so for example, obviously when I was young, I was always the tallest guy on the team. So they say, Conlon, get underneath. You're the center. Or during the off season, when I would go to a basketball camp, I'd bring a notebook and I'd work on my jump shot. I'd work on my ball handling. I'd work on those things, not necessarily for 9th grade, for 10th grade, but hopefully for, university, for college, for maybe professional. And it did come true because, obviously 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, I was in the post, in high school. But when I was with the Charlotte Hornets, it was important for me to hit that 16-footer when Muggsy Bogues drove.
Yeah.
So that work that I would put in the summers, working on those skills that I not necessarily used during the season, but I knew I'd use 3-4 years down the road if my career progressed, came in handy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marty. We really appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
Okay, so there you go. Marty Conlon, a.k.a. the Celtic Killer, a.k.a. Marty McFly. That was the nickname that a lot of folks gave him. That's a fun nickname, especially to have during the late 80s, early 90s.
I don't know if it's the same as Celtic Killer, but Marty McFly, yes, also a very good one. Celtic Killer. I imagine a lot of people like that nickname.
Well, Marty was a big that liked to run the floor. I mean, I did manage to find some highlights and game footage of Marty Conlon on YouTube, playing for the Charlotte Hornets, and he was a little bit of a mobile big. And what I love about that conversation is that he really kind of opened up my eyes to how different this Hornets offense was than the rest of the league. And you and I sort of touched on that before we went to that interview, which is, look at this. I mean, 5 of 8 from 3 for Eddie, 4 of 8 from Dell Curry. Muggsy had 10 assists in this game. Only 5 points, but 10 assists. He was moving the basketball a lot. He was getting up and down the floor.
32 total.
Yeah. 32 assists. They shared the basketball. This wasn't an ISO team, Walker.
Yeah, well, and plus, especially with Alonzo out and you don't have Larry Johnson in this game either.
Yeah.
It's kind of called for, especially when Muggsy Bogues is the guy bringing the ball up the floor. Eddie Johnson and Dell Curry, especially Dell Curry, a spot-up shooter. You're going to have to find ways to manufacture some points and move the basketball around. Now, they scored 112. It was the defense that allowed a really high field goal percentage to the Indiana Pacers. That's not going to get it done. But at least offensively, they gave themselves a chance with a couple of players in Eddie Johnson and Dell Curry. That was it, though. I mean, that was it. Who else was scoring the basket? I guess you had a little bit of help from Hersey, but not a good field goal percentage from him, not shooting the ball well. Didn't even take many from deep. And then you had to rely a ton on your bench. 4 guys getting over 20 minutes in this game, and you just didn't have enough of the firepower to get the ball in the bucket.
Yeah, and not enough of just defense and size to really compete with Rick Smits, who was just amazing in this game. But yeah, I mean, this was a team that played a different offensive style, one that was ahead of its time. And it really, I think, gives you an appreciation of what Muggsy was able to do, just like moving the basketball, but also getting it up and down the floor. And also Alan Bristow, who I learned studied under Doug Moe, who was one of the big proponents of bringing motion offense to the NBA game. And now it obviously took a while to really take on, because the teams that were winning championships were doing so mostly with that isolation style basketball. But Alan Bristow was somebody who respected Doug Moe and tried to bring that style to the Hornets.
Former Tar Heel, by the way, Doug Moe is. And as we're talking about some of the injuries, right, I do have a rabbit hole here, Doug, that I want to get to, if you don't mind. So Larry Johnson.
You go down that. I want to look at the game log while you're doing that and just see how they did during this period where they lost Alonzo and Larry.
Okay, so no Larry Johnson, no Alonzo Mourning. I'm going to focus on Alonzo in this rabbit hole, though, because Alonzo was also ejected in this game, Doug. As you mentioned, you did the research here. He was ejected, but he wasn't even playing. He was in street clothes, and he got bounced from the game. And I kind of remember Alonzo being a temperamental player. Mm-hmm. And that was true only for a little bit. And then it ended up kind of fixing itself. Alonzo started to change his ways as his career went on. So I call this a Gonzo morning, Doug. In his first
Why?
In his first 2 seasons, that it's because it's fantastic. In his first 2 seasons, Alonzo was assessed 40 technical fouls and he was ejected 7 times.
Yikes.
He was ejected 7 times in his first 2 seasons. He was a bad, bad boy. Then he was on pace to finish with over 200 techs. If you go based off of what he did his first 2 years, based off the amount of games that he would play in hindsight, he was on pace to finish with over 200 techs in his career. That would have put him 6th all time, just ahead of Anthony Mason at 192 at the end of his career. The amount of ejections is a little more staggering. 7 in 2 years is a lot. And to the best of my research, Doug, which I admit my Googling, it was a little hard to find this information, who had what amount of ejections the most of all time. I think I was able to find it, though. So to the best of my research, 11 ejections total, that lands you in the top 10 all time. So Alonzo was already 70% of the way there after his first 2 years were done. But Zoe changes his ways. In his 3rd season with Charlotte, he only compiled 7 techs, and he wasn't ejected at all. And as far as I can tell, was not ejected more than a few times the rest of the way through. So kind of crazy. First 2 years, Zoe was not the ref's best friend by any stretch of the imagination, and then changed his ways as his career went on. Remember, Alonzo was a guy that stayed in the NBA for a long time. You might think that he just compiled a couple of ejections here and there after that kind of start, but never did. Not on any top 10 list I looked at. Changed a little based off some publications I was looking at. Kind of crazy, though. And for those that want this a little bit more in perspective, Rasheed Wallace has the record for 41 techs in a season. That came in 2000, 2001. Rasheed also leads in ejections in a season with 29. Karl Malone leads in technical fouls all time.
The mailman.
At 332, a little bit of a compiler. Rasheed doing a lot more bang for your buck there.
What are you doing there? What are you doing there with Rasheed? You're doing Rasheed. You're really putting the emphasis hard on Ra.
Rasheed Wallace. Do you show me that?
Well, see that was I think how most human beings say it. You said it as if you were an alien coming down to Earth, studying the English language and having a hard time with it. Rasheed Wallace.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people could hear me instead of saying, Sheed Wallace is fine. You just want me to go Sheed, Rasheed,
or just say it normal. That's
Mr.
all I'm
Wallace,
asking.
Mr. Tech himself. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for helping me just land the dismount here. That is it for Alonzo Mourning, and I appreciate your help, Doug.
Always, man.
No, what's great about you too is that you really help at the beginning and you also help at the end. You really do a great job.
Yeah, then I leave you out on a cliff at the end for sure.
Yeah, that's perfect. So thank you. Anyways, yes, kind of crazy to see Alonzo change his ways.
All right, so I've been looking at the game log for the Charlotte Hornets during the 93-94 season, and just if I'm just eyeballing it here, okay, they get off to a pretty great start. Now they lose 2 of their first 3, but then they get a little 5-game winning streak going on here. So you're 6-2. Great start, but then they have this little 5-game blip here. They get things back on track at the midway through December, and things are looking good, kind of going back and forth through January, and then that's when I think it was mid to early December is when they first lose Larry Johnson, and then at the end of January they lose Alonzo. So now you're dealing with no Mourning, no Larry. And you can see January, it just falls off a cliff. Mm-hmm. They lose 3, 6, 7, 8 in a row. They get a win against Houston, and then they lose their next 8 again. So 2 8-game losing streaks sandwiched by a win against Houston.
Oh, that is brutal. That is brutal basketball.
And then they get both guys back, and they string together a great end to the season to get back to 500. That's the thing. I mean, they had a losing record for a good bit of this season, and they pulled things back together and came within a game of getting back to the playoffs, but it wasn't to be.
And notice the only loss in the stretch in that winning game, that winning stretch was to Chicago by 3 points, it looks like. So that was the only one. And Chicago, I guess, was without Michael at that point. Bulls still a good team, though, and had high expectations. I think they took the Knicks, was it 6 games in that series? I think that might be right. So anyways, yeah, still an impressive stretch for them. And you go back to all of the L's they compiled. You have to wonder, could they have gotten, they certainly could have gotten, 6 more wins maybe in that? I don't know. And then that would have helped them to close to 50 wins and maybe competing in the Eastern Conference. It would have been tough. New York still very good. That was the year also I think Orlando Orlando would have gone, what was it, the next year? But anyways, those were the two. Michael Jordan gone from the NBA years.
Well, here's something interesting. So in our last episode, we talked about how the Hornets missed the playoffs in 18-19, partially due to the fact that they lost to the Orlando Magic, who were being coached by Steve Clifford, who was the Hornets coach in the previous season. So it was a little bit poetic that they get knocked out by the coach that they fired. Okay. Well, here's something interesting. They lose the final game of this season. I just told you they were a game out of the playoffs. They lose their final game of the season to the Washington Bullets, who Marty Conlon would go on to play for because the Hornets did not keep Marty Conlon on after Zoe returned. So do I dare I've not clicked on this box score. I don't know what I'm going to see here. Do I dare click on this Bullets box score to see if Conlon put the stake in the Hornets?
I think we need to revisit this once we get to 2047, and then once we get to that episode, and then I'm going to do it now.
Okay. I'm going to do it now. We're going to go Bullets 117 over the Hornet. They needed this game so desperately. And the Bullets, look at this. This was the Bullets were terrible. 24-58. They threw this season away. I mean, I don't know. I have to go look and see if Miami also, if Miami won their game, it wouldn't have mattered. But oh man, incredible pace to this game. 106.3. That's like modern day pace.
Yeah, both of them doing that.
Okay, I'm looking at it. So you've got Larry back, you've got Zoe back, everything's humming along.
Well, that's a lot of Tony Bennett in this game too. 37 minutes from Tony Bennett.
Yeah, Eddie Johnson goes back to the bench, so something must have gone wrong with Eddie Johnson.
What happened?
Yeah, what happened there? Why is Tony Bennett getting 37 minutes? We'll have to ask Alan Bristow someday. I'm scared. Did he do it? Did Marty Conlon didn't play many minutes in this game. But that's okay. Hey, but look at this name. Rex Chapman for the Washington Bullets.
I would not have guessed that he played for Washington. I don't remember that. And I know Phoenix. I know obviously the Hornets. I would not have guessed Washington. Just completely would have slipped my mind.
Well, we haven't talked a lot about Sexy Rexy yet. But Rex Chapman, of course, was the first draft pick, first rounder draft pick in Hornets history. But Rex had a little bit of a checkered history in Charlotte, was known, had a reputation of being a little bit temperamental, and taking some shots that the coach didn't want him to take. They have great relationships with Hornets coach or Hornets management. I don't think Shin liked him either. So Rex eventually exits the franchise. Only has 10 points in this one. This was really about Gugliotta. 31 points.
That early, I did not know that he was putting up numbers in 93, 94. I would have guessed his heyday was like, I don't know, 97, a little bit later, but goodness gracious, 30 in 94. I did not know he was doing work that early.
Googs.
And
Rex Chapman finished with 10 points.
10 of 13. George, we're doing another show. We're doing 2-1. We can't do that.
Sorry. Murasan.
Okay.
Oh, what a name. I just love going through all these names, man. And they had just beaten the Bullets 3 games earlier. They had beaten them 117-111. They play them. I mean, I think I have to now go to Miami's game log and just see if that was the difference maker. That it would be an absolute heartbreaker if it was. Let's see, Miami, final game of the season. They lost the final game of the season
to the Pacers.
Whoa, my God. They could have, I don't know if they had the tiebreaker, but they could have
gone to the postseason. Yeah.
They could have possibly gone to the postseason had it not been for the Washington Bullets, who had Marty Conlon after maybe it was all good. Maybe it was just a good luck. Maybe Conlon was a good luck charm, and they lost it because they gave up Marty Conlon.
So, yeah, if you want to play that game, you go to the standings. Who are the teams I mentioned? I think it was Atlanta and New York at the top of the Eastern Conference standings. New York, they're going to win. Atlanta, I don't know what Atlanta did. They never really did anything too much in their playoff history because, remember, they just ended their endless conference finals streak a couple years ago when they upset the Philadelphia 76ers. So 57, a lot of wins in that regular season. I wonder if they got upset, though.
Oh, look at these little Craig Elo, little Mookie Blaylock, little Kevin Willis, Danny Manning, Dominique Wilkins, of course, Stacey Augmon. John Koncak.
Yeah, we're just going all over the. Yes, we are.
Andrew Lang.
Yeah.
Dwayne Farrell. Ennis Watley.
Yeah. Okay.
Adam Keefe.
Okay.
Doug Edwards. Paul Graham.
Almost.
John Bagley.
And last one.
Ricky Grace. My daughter's name.
Ricky?
I think that's a perfect place to end.